In a world full of distractions, there is one big question on every dog owner's lips.
How do I become more than just the person holding the other end of the leash?
We all get dogs with a dream in mind, a vision of the future. And if right now your everyday reality isn't quite that picture you had in mind, you are in the right place.
It really doesn't have to be this way.
You absolutely can and will be more to your dog than just the person who gets in between them and the world.
The key is you need to be more sexy.
More sexy than the neighbourhood cat.
More sexy than the jogger in the park.
More sexy than that half-eaten hamburger they just found on the floor.
And yes, even more sexy than the dog across the road.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Lauren.
Together we're Absolute Dogs.
And you're listening to the Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast, the podcast that teaches you how to become sexier than the squirrel to your dog, getting rid of distractions, making your dog more focused, and just generally having a pretty cool companion.
Now, today is a really important topic. It's a topic that actually causes a lot of people, a lot of dogs, a lot of stress, actually.
Yeah.
And it's one of those areas that if you don't tackle it, can actually be quite painful. And that is noise sensitivity and dogs with any type of noise struggles.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we're talking about in this episode is those dogs that are worried or scared of noises, whether that's quiet noises, whether that's loud noises.
It could be as simple as like, I don't know, someone making like a knocking sound.
Yeah.
So outside recently we had someone just doing roof work, and very quickly you could see how that changed the dynamics of a border collie household because it was something they were definitely very aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an incredibly common and prevalent struggle within dogs. I did a study in 2012 that looked at a population of dogs in the United Kingdom and whether they had any kind of fear response to very commonly occurring loud noises. And the crazy thing is that 79% of the dogs within that population that was looked at was just a general dog population owned by general normal people. They showed some level of fear response to a loud noise, whether that be vehicle noise, whether that be the vacuum cleaner, whether that be fireworks, thunder, you name it.
The scary thing is that working with dogs and their people, we see time and time again so many people that obviously do notice and acknowledge this, and worryingly so many people that do not acknowledge or notice this. And I can say he looks a little bit worried, do you want to pop him back in the vehicle and we'll quickly discuss some strategies? And they're like, oh no, he's fine. So actually that 79% reported that are noticing and acknowledging it, right?
And this is the interesting thing. That's a really good point. Is the way that study worked is it asked owners, what does your dog do in response to those response to those noises? So first of all, the owners would be asked, well, is your dog scared of fireworks? And they'd say, and some owners would say, oh no, he's not. And I say, okay, well, does he bark when he hears a firework? Yes, he does. Does he pace? Yes, he does that. Does he stare out the window? Yes, he does that. Does he scratch at doors or furniture? Yes, he does that. And the interesting thing is that this is kind of the first step to working on this struggle, is acknowledging that it is a struggle and acknowledging that actually it's fear, it's worry, it's anxiety that's driving this response that dogs are showing. And I think that's actually one of the more common things that we see, is that we've first of all got to see that it's happening.
And I think that's one of the biggies here, is that definitely a lot of people don't necessarily see what their dog is doing as a direct or indirect correlation with the noise or the thing. And I remember only recently here we had a lot of thunder, like a crazy week. I don't know if you remember, full of thunder, like crazy thunder. And actually some owners who said their dogs were completely fine with thunder, I would have suggested that they were really not. And actually they were showing quite visible demonstrations and displays of being uncomfortable in that scenario sort of situation. And yet it wasn't something that was being generally acknowledged by the owner.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the interesting thing about the development of this struggle is that dogs are born, they grow up, they might go to their new homes at 8 weeks old, and we see a lot of dogs 8, 9, 10 weeks old, even up to 6 months old, where actually they've not discovered that noises are important. And the interesting thing about them not discovering that noises are important is with this kind of group of dogs that have just never discovered the importance of noises, that it's very difficult to train them verbal cues. It's very difficult to put a verbal cue on a behavior that you've taught them. The other thing that it's quite difficult to do is to teach them a recall. Now, interestingly, often these dogs are owned by owners that are a little bit like chatterboxers, and so they're constantly reminding their dog that noises are not important.
For owners who Tom is calling chatterbox.
Because if you're constantly talking to your dog, then actually they kind of quickly learn, oh, the stuff that comes out of your mouth has no significance.
I was worried about that.
Stuff that comes out of your nose also has no significance.
Let's not discuss that here.
So the first thing to say is that dogs aren't necessarily all naturally discovering that noises are important for the better or the worse. But then what happens is that dogs, whether it's because they have an underlying like pessimism where they hear something, they don't know what it is, they assume it to be something bad, over time this starts to teach them that noises are important. And the key is that noises are important for the worse, right? They're not, they're negative events that happen. And this grows and grows and grows, and it will grow and grow and grow until they are told otherwise. So have you ever had that situation where somebody has maybe given you the impression that another person is not a nice person, or you met somebody, or you've seen somebody and they were kind of in the same circle as you, but you never actually spoke to them directly, so you kept seeing them and you were thinking, oh, I get a funny vibe from him or her, and I'm not that
funny
sure
good
about
vibe, funny bad vibe.
bad vibe. And then it just kind of self-perpetuates, right? Because nobody teaches you otherwise. And then at some point, somebody might say to you, oh my word, he is like the best guy, or she's the best girl.
The kindest ever guy, always generous, always
Super
looking out
generous.
for everyone. And you're like...
Yeah. Oh,
surprise.
Now that I've been told otherwise, it's fine. But in the meantime, that had just been growing and growing and growing.
Self-perpetuating.
And the crazy thing is that emotions work this way, and learning and behavior works this way, that what could have just been a little hunch that you didn't like them, or somebody just saying a passing comment that you'd misinterpreted about someone, over time that grows and grows and grows into hatred, right? That emotion gets stronger and stronger.
And yet you actually have
It was just based on an initial pessimism. It was just based on an initial, like, oh, there's an ambiguous situation. I'm feeling a little bit pessimistic. I'm going to err on the side of it being a bad thing. And that's hardwired into all of us to protect ourselves. So it's understandable. But the point is that unless we teach, dogs do exactly the same thing. And unless we step in and teach them otherwise and interrupt that kind of perpetuation, well, it's going to get worse over time. It's not all of a sudden going to get better. We often see people that they try and show their dogs that something is good by repeatedly doing it. So I don't know, a dog's worried about a person. Well, let's get the person to come up to them and stroke them, and they're going to visit. They're going to visit that person time and time again,
many times.
But the point is that all we're doing is we're giving them an opportunity to grow their hatred. We're giving them the opportunity for that negative emotional response to get stronger and stronger. It's a process called sensitization.
Now, the thing is, when we say about, I suppose, noise sensitivity, it can be as crazy as I have one student and their dog who cannot cope with the person sneezing.
Yeah.
So if that person sneezes, it sends the whole house into chaos.
Yeah.
So she's desperately trying not to sneeze. And everyone knows how it feels when you want to sneeze. She's desperately trying not
torture.
to. And the dog can even predict, like when you, I don't know what you call it, when you attempt to not sneeze.
Yeah.
The dog can even sort of predict those and notices those as well. It could be something like those. Or it could be something as simple and regular as maybe the dustbin truck arriving.
Yeah.
So there are so many, it's broad, right? Like it's a broad topic.
Absolutely. Now, before we dive into how we would grow this and how we would change this and how we would prevent this, if your dog has a sudden change in behavior, no matter what the struggle is that they suddenly develop, but especially if they suddenly become very worried about noises, this would be a kind of real flag for us to get a vet involved and just get our dogs assessed and get our dogs checked, because you've got to think that if you've got a sore back, you're probably going to be a little bit more tetchy that week about things that are going on.
You're going to be more pessimistic. You're going to feel a little bit more angsty. You're generally, and that's, I mean, we think in our terms. A client of ours said only the other day, her dog was really off for a couple of days, and I said I would have bet that was pain. And for me, that's when you check them out, because there likely is some pain somewhere or something that's really put them into a different space.
Absolutely. And so get a great relationship with your vet. Let them know what the situation is, and a great vet would never make you out to be crazy for bringing them.
And also best that your vet knows your dog when they're normal. So we would say to everybody who's listening to the podcast, actually your dog being normal when they're at the vets is also useful. So actually we see like a baseline that way.
100%. So now kind of moving on to what would be our initial tips on working on this. So we want to, within this episode, we want to give you tools that you can run with,
strategies that you absolutely feel like you can help your dog, because this one, and you can help yourself, because this one is a painful one, right? For dogs and for owners.
100%. So the first tip, if we think about it, this noise reactivity, whatever you want to call it, fear responses to loud noises, it started with the assumption that the noise was a bad thing, whether that's because the noise was really loud and it startled them, or whether it's just because they were in a little bit of a pessimistic space that day and it was a little bit ambiguous.
Witnessed another dog who was pessimistic, or an owner who was very pessimistic, because I've definitely watched that within dog groups and within owners and handlers and their dogs, right?
Absolutely. And there are certain noises that are especially ambiguous. I mean, I don't know, guys, if you've seen a horror film recently, but the noise, the music, the soundtrack is purposefully created to be ambiguous and to really kind of feed into your underlying pessimism that we have in scary situations and grow that fear. And these noises are happening all the time with our dogs. Whether it's repetitive noises, often dogs don't like. So like crow scarers that repeatedly
and another
go
one
off.
for here is I think a really good example for here actually is the fact that there's often shotgun. So there's shotgun because we live in a place where there is it's very country, right? Like it's a country shooting sort of town. And so for me, if you watch like a Springer or a Cocker or a Lab around the shooting sort of season, they're like, whoa, eyes are alert, and they're really like, oh, this is exciting. Whereas you can watch some of the Border Collies who are like, what on earth is going on here? Now, our dogs get pretty used to it pretty quickly. However, what I would say is it's like a completely different response depending on the outcome from that.
Both think that the noise is important, but for very different reasons. So what we're saying is that often the cause of this is an assumption that there is a negative outcome. So what you can do is implement a protocol that we call distraction, mark, treat protocol. Now what this is it says that, distractions are happening all the time. Noises are happening all the time. What we're going to do is let our dogs know that we notice it as well. We heard it, and it's going to lead to a positive outcome. So the way that looks is noise happens. In other words, the distraction happens. We then follow up with a marker word. So we might say something like nice. That's nice and calm and chilled. And it's like, nice, I spot that too. You can say that if you want, but it's a bit of a mouthful. And then what you're going to do is you're going to follow up with some of your dog's daily food allowance.
When you're doing this, just as Tom's alluded to here, the noises that you're going to use could be really varied to anything. So it could be as simple as, I don't know, a leaf or a twig falling off a tree to a shotgun in the distance. Actually taking the more sort of subtle ones, like the leaf falling, or a lawnmower going, or
a dog barking in the distance,
a chainsaw starting. So when we were doing logging here not that long ago, it's quite a long distance away, and it's an odd noise, but it's a subtle, it's a normal country noise. Those are the ones we want to do, right? And the cool thing is that there are noises happening all the time, but as humans we decide that certain noises are not important, so our brain blocks them, so we don't hear, those people that live near busy roads, and I'm sure there are some listeners that live near a busy road, and you don't hear the road noise, and yet if you get a guest to come to your house, they're very aware of it. I remember working, and we visited not that long ago a lovely horse farm, and the lovely horse farm, we were walking around, and it was a blast from the past really, and when I was there I was like, wow, that road noise is immense. And yet I didn't really remember it like that when I spent a lot of time there when much earlier when I was younger. And it's funny, I think the roads haven't changed at all. Simply, I've had a break away from it and I came back and I really noticed the traffic noise. So it is absolutely that. It's like the white noise scenarios, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we've got to do as owners is open up our awareness to all these noises. And then what we've got to do is pair them up with a positive outcome. So hear the car driving past, nice, feed. Nice, feed. Hear the dog bark in the distance. Nice, feed. Hear, I don't know, acknowledge that when you put your coffee cup down on the table, it makes a noise. Nice, and feed. In doing that, what we're saying is, hey, noises, they always lead to a positive outcome, and that's regardless of what your dog is worried about. Now, moving on from that, of course, there are certain dogs with certain struggles whereby there are very specific noises that they're very worried about, and they seem fine with everything else. And we get owners of these dogs come to us a lot and ask for advice because there's no level of exposure to that noise that they're scared of that dog can cope with to teach them that it's a good outcome. And so we're going to introduce you to something now that's really exciting, and it totally changes this, and it's exactly what we do with all the dogs that we teach and all the dogs that we help and transform.
I should say that actually, guys, if you're obviously checking this podcast out for yourself, then amazing and well done you. And actually, this is something that would be worth sharing because this struggle in itself causes so much pain. It causes so much heartache for owners, for their dogs, for their families. It causes, I mean, let's be honest, it can cause accidents. It can be a real issue, a shotgun going and a dog bolting or whatever it is. Like, this can cause so much pain. And since we've come up with solutions and strategies, we feel so much better from doing it, right?
And the crazy thing is the information isn't out there, and we want the information to be out there.
So we want you
That's
to
why
share
we're
it.
Speaking to you. So whether you're listening to this on iTunes, you know what, share the link. Whether you're listening to it on Spotify, share the link. If you haven't already subscribed on those, by the way, guys, make sure to subscribe because then you get notified when new episodes become available. If you're watching this on Facebook as a Facebook premiere, then make sure that you hit share on this video so that other people see it, because this is life-changing for dogs and owners when they have this struggle. So we want to introduce you to something called submodalities. Now, what submodalities are is that effectively there are lots of events that happen. There might be visual events, there might be auditory events, so noises, there might be olfactory events, so smells, and all these different events that can be perceived by the various senses. Now, the cool thing is that within an event, there are certain characteristics. So if we think about visual events, well, there's brightness, there's darkness, there's color, there's flashing, right? And we can even go down to shapes. When we talk visual, we can talk about animals, but then what are animals? Well, you know what? They're a blob with 4 points of contact on the ground that represent their 4 legs. And that's actually, when we drill down what are the components of an event, we start to realize that there's opportunities everywhere to work our dogs towards seeing the world in a better light. Now, when it comes to noises, it's really exciting because there are quite a few different submodalities that we can talk about, and we can't talk about all of them within this episode.
Oh, come on, surely we can.
I know, it'd be so cool, wouldn't it? But what we can think about is loud versus quiet. So we can think about volume. We can think about pitch. So we can think about low pitch. We can think about high pitch. And every noise has these characteristics, right? The other one that's really important with dogs and dogs with noise struggles is continuous noises versus staccato noises, so intermittent noises, right? And in thinking about just those 3 submodalities that we've just briefly introduced you to now, maybe your dog's worried about motorbikes. Well, motorbikes are a loud noise that's high-pitched and it's continuous. Can you think of other high-pitched noises that you could maybe do distraction mark treat on to grow their optimism in that respect? Absolutely.
And ones that are not the motorbike, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's the big thing, is that so many people go straight to the issue. They go straight to that exact thing. And this is where you can start to really think so much broader. It's very special for your dog.
Can you think about, can you imagine, or do you imagine encountering other loud noises? Well, of course, we can distraction mark treat those. Can you encounter in your day-to-day life other continuous noises? Well, of course, because they're probably going to be happening intermittently, continuously all the time.
So by splitting them up, actually, we have way more opportunity. Yeah. And that's probably one of the biggest things is that motorbikes, let's be honest, I don't hear any motorbikes here because of where we live. However, if I was working through them, then yes, lots of those other opportunities are going to happen. Yeah. Continuous noises like the lawnmower, continuous noises like the strimmers. Yeah. There are so many options.
And this is the cool thing is that, we live in a very rural area and we could easily not see many people, not see many dogs, not hear
probably
many noises.
Just see sheep, right?
Yeah, sheep and hear gunshots. But the cool thing is that our dogs then come to places like cities with us. They come to crufts with us. They come to big show environments.
What I love is how simply they adjust, how much they don't question where they are. They don't kind of go, oh, we're in a new place. It's just normal, right?
Yeah, and so at some point, our dogs might get to, I don't know, 13, 18 months old before they encounter a motorbike. And the cool thing is that the way that this training and these games work is they hear the motorbike and literally they're like, high-pitched, loud, continuous noise. Yeah, optimist about that. Yeah. Because we've worked on it in loads of different situations. We've done this DMT, distraction mark treat protocol, for all the various submodalities.
It's like a life learning. I remember at our school when I was younger, I had the motto, for life, not school, we learn. And that's the thing with DMT. You're learning for life. It's not for the sake of learning. So for the sake of school or I suppose a tick sheet. You're learning for life. It's something that you can use across the whole of your dog's life, and you never quite know when it will come in handy. I remember there's this huge thing, one-time learning, some events like, I don't know, huge gunshot or a crow scarer. Those can be typical ones that we would hear around here. And actually what I've noticed is the more that I work on this before those events ever happen, the cooler our dogs are. Like the cooler they are. Like they literally, those one-time learning events are no longer so traumatic, right? Like they're no longer even a thing, really, because of this.
So what we've done is we've talked about quite a few different things there, but we really want to arm you with, first of all, figuring out, does your dog have fear responses to noises, whether quiet or loud? If the answer is yes, what submodalities do you need to think about and consider and be aware of? Is it loud noises, quiet noises? Is it continuous noises? Is it intermittent noises? Is it high pitch? Is it low pitch? And then we want you to implement that distraction mark treat protocol. And if you're listening and you're like, oh my word, this is the best episode ever because my dog has struggled with noises for their whole life. Well, if that's the case, if it's a big struggle, that probably means you need to put a large proportion of their daily food allowance into what they need, right? And that is, of course, this distraction mark treat protocol that we've spoken about. That was the noise episode. It's a big one. It's one that we really want you to share.
It's one that really is worth sharing because it's going to help people and their dogs worldwide. Whether you're a trainer, whether you'd like to be a trainer, whether you just like sharing cool dog stuff, it's absolutely out there and it really does need to go further.
Absolutely. Make sure to subscribe, whether it's on iTunes or Spotify. If you've not given the Absolute Dogs Facebook page a follow yet, make sure to do so because we do lots of live teaching on there and there's lots of video content that goes up there as well so that you can really immerse yourself in it. If you haven't left us a review, please leave a review, because what reviews do is they give other people context that are thinking they're looking for dog training advice and they're researching what's out there, and your review could give someone the context that they need to listen to maybe this episode and transform their dog.
Very, very quick story just from the weekend. We were away at the weekend and I was shocked to watch how many dogs were lead popped and jerked and grabbed and shook, and one dog really physically grabbed and for me there are so many better ways. I'm going to put it out there. There are better ways to do it, and there are kinder ways to do it, and this is one of them. So absolutely, we want you listening.
And just on that story, guys, it's be very easy to judge owners in that situation. I can bet they're great owners. They just don't know a better way.
They're so frustrated, and that's the thing. And for me, only we could go on again now. But we had one lady who her beagle ran up, hackles up, really doggy and running all around around our dogs, and she was really angry at him. And I said, look, just get him hold and pop him back on lead. And as soon as she had him on lead, I diverted her straight to the podcast. And I told her about Absolute Dogs, and I didn't tell her I was Lauren. I just said, this is how it rolls. And you need to go over there and have a look. Very, very independent review here. And I just loved that she went away feeling a little bit better about a situation that she was feeling pretty terrible about. And it wasn't that she didn't want to know. It was that she's so frustrated and she doesn't know, right? So please, like Tom said, this is not about being judgy. This is about being the best dog training community, sharing and caring and being kind as we can, right?
Absolutely. So with that, guys, that was this episode. We will see you next week in the next Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast. And in the meantime, remember, stay sexy. Hey, before you go, have you taken part in the worldwide Sexier Than a Squirrel challenge?
It's a 25-day online video program, huge energy, amazing community, and over 6,000 people are already taking part.
The only question is, you know where you are today. Where do you want to be 25 days from now? Head to absolutedogs.me/sexy.